Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Welcome to online class of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University. So we are going to deal with paper course 7, that is aspects of language and their relation to literature. If you recall, we have discussed structuralism in detail, trying to understand that structuralism is a perspective, that is a way of looking at world in terms of structures. And the crux of structuralism is that anything, any constituent part of a structure cannot be understood alone, but in its proper context or within the larger structure, right? To give a working example, that is, in order to understand uh, what a wall is, or importance of a wall, we need to look at the building as a whole. So that is a very working definition to understand what structuralism as a theory is trying to say. So that particular idea of seeing the world in terms of structure is being applied to language. Okay, so uh, uh, its chief proponent, propagator, uh, Ferdinand de Saussure, right? He was a Swiss linguist. He tried to convey that language uh, can be understood as a system, the complete system, where its constituent part, the least or the basic constituent part of that whole structure is sign, right? Whereas sign is comprised of signifier and signified. I think we have taken up that example of something drawn on a board which resembles a mango, and that structure, that diagram on the board uh, is actually could be a sound mango, right? A sound uh, arati pandu, right? A sound on arm. So sign and the signifier and signifier, right, could be sound or image, right, or image like representation. Okay, so one is what actually entails, and the other what we are using to convey that. So one is signifier and the other is signified. Okay, the sound mango, right, in our case is the signifier, and that picture, that diagram of mango on the board is actually signified. Okay, so this is a quick recap of what we dealt with in the previous class. So we'll try to take up a new topic in today's class, and let me share the screen with you. Today we will talk about just give me a second. I'm trying to make the screen visible to you. It'll not take a couple of minutes. I'm still with you. Just a second. Yes. In today's class, we'll try to take up this new topic that is, functions of literature. If you want to locate it in your printed materials sent by the university, you can do that on, say, in the unit, yes, in the block 2, okay? In block 2, you can, locate these particular topics. We have different functions of language, including poetic and other functions. So we'll be today, quickly looking at or revising these particular block. And then if time allows us, so we'll also look at some important topics from whatever blocks we have covered so far. Okay. Is this the last class or last but one class? I think tomorrow also we have a class, right?
Yes, sir.
So that would be the last class, right?
Yes.
Okay, so after that we don't have any schedule. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go through this topic and then we'll take up some important topics from examination point of view. Okay. So thank you so much for being with me and listening to my lecture so far and cooperating in terms of your participation and feedback. I really appreciate that, and I wish it continues uh, in future as well. So coming to the function of literature, we know that if we just look back uh, a few things like in terms of understanding the language of literature. So uh, we know that in this paper we are trying to understand how language and literature are interrelated, right? Are interrelated, not only interrelated but also interdependent. Okay, so there cannot be literature without language. That's what we understood in one of our previous lectures. And when it comes to defining literature, right, it could be printed text, it could be published one, and some literary scholars also say that whatever we uh, produce as human beings orally until the start of the printing in human civilization, that also is literature, but it's actually oral literature. Okay. Quick definitions of the literature that we can find in different dictionaries. So body of written works, imaginative works of poetry and prose, writings having excellence of form or expression, and expressing ideas of permanent or universal interest. Right? Writings that are primarily informative, technical, scholarly, journalistic would be excluded from the rank of literature. Now, one thing you can keep in mind is that anything that is printed could be considered literature, but there are some exclusions, right? That exclusion is technical, scholarly, and journalistic would be excluded from the rank of literature. An important criteria to be called literature is imaginative, right? Imaginative element in any writing. If it is there, then that is what we call it as literature. Now, by now we have more sophisticated, criteria to, to call something as literature. That is, we have come to a point where we are able to distinguish between not just literature and non-literature, but within the literature we have different forms, right? Fiction is one, right? Poetry is one, another drama is one. So all these things, constitute what we today call as, literature. So just by taking one, poster on a wall, we cannot say it is a literature. Okay. Yes. So then this is, yeah, the forms of poetry, drama, fiction, non-fiction, epic, sonnet, short story, blah, blah, blah. So use of language in special ways. Okay. So this I think we have somewhere in our previous physical classes we discussed these things. How we can distinguish between scientific language, literary language, and everyday language, right? Scientific language is denotative, whereas literary language is connotative, meaning based on emotional association, indirect. Okay. Denotative example is blue. Blue is basically a name of a color. but blue also represents sad feeling. So use of blue to mean sad feeling is what connotative stands for, and that is what we do in literature, right? So then we have denotative, which means actual, literal meaning. Blue means color blue. That's it. This kind of usage of language is scientific or denotative. And when it comes to everyday language, what kind of language we use in everyday? Right, we use a combination of both connotative and denotative. So what makes a language a literary language? I'm actually trying to revise these things quickly so that we can go to talk about functions of literature. Just for those who couldn't attend earlier classes. Yeah, so normal language becomes literary language because of one primary thing, that is figures of speech. Remember this. Any normal language becomes literary language when you have literary elements in that. That is figures of speech. Literary devices we also have. Yeah, so two examples of what are the figures of speech. We know metaphor, simile, right? Pun, so many list of items that are figures of speech, right? The imagery is also that. Metaphor, a comparison between two things that aren't alike but do have something in common. Example, the world's stage, right? So similarly, you have fun, a joke that makes a play on words. Example, the tallest building in the town is the library. It has thousands of stories. Right? Whereas the story means floor, right? One floor, two floor, three floor, right? Apartments these days have multiple floors. A floor is also called story. So multi-story building. So here pun is uh, a library building which has multiple stories, also multiple thousands of stories. Okay, so a story, a normal story, and a story as also floor. So that is a small pun there, small joke there. Ambiguity is another, right? Something with more than one possible. Yeah, this is kind of small question that is being asked. Differentiate between normal language and scientific language, or differentiate between uh, uh, scientific language and everyday language, right? Or write about ambiguity, metaphor, and all those things. These kind of short answer type questions also have come in the past in examination. So if you pay a little attention, you will be able to write about it. Ambiguities means something with more than one possible meaning. Example, I saw a man with telescope. What do you understand by this? I saw a man with telescope. దీనికి అర్థం ఏంటి?
I saw the I saw the man with carrying a telescope, and another meaning, I saw the man through the lens of the telescope. Two different.
Very good. So yeah, so this possibility of more than one meaning at a sentence level or at a word level in the usage is what we call it as ambiguity. Okay, so I saw a man with telescope. I saw a man with a telescope. When you read also, if you break the the flow, that also defines what means what. For example, if I read, I saw a man with a telescope, then it means the first example. That is, there is a person who is carrying a telescope and to whom I saw. But if you read in another way, that is, I saw a man with telescope. I saw a man with a telescope. I saw a man with telescope. Okay, so maybe we can make a subtle difference between the two. Okay, now ambiguity, according to William Emerson, helps a statement to yield several meanings by keeping open many possibilities. Now, William Emerson is a person who talks about 7 types of ambiguity. You can refer to his work. I think it is on page number. Let me just check and tell you, so that 7 types of ambiguity is a question. often asked in your examination. Or we'll do one thing, we'll come back from the unit 1 onwards to mark important questions. At that time, we'll look at where it is actually. It's in the second block itself somewhere. Okay, he finds that metaphor and pun as source of ambiguity. So there are 7 different types of ambiguity according to William Emerson, but he says all those 7 types, right, are a result of either metaphor or pun. Okay. Then you have irony as another figure of speech, which makes literature what literature is, like ambiguity and metaphor and simile. So what is irony? Use of words to convey a meaning that is the opposite of its literal meaning. For example, you have asked a good question. Right? You have asked a good question is actually a statement used to mean better you should not have asked. Or you ask a challenging question. So to mean that you ask a challenging question or better you should not have asked that question, you say you have asked a good question. That is the irony. Now, types of irony, when it comes to types of irony, there are multiple, like 3 different popular types of irony are verbal. That is, what is said is different from what is meant. Good question. In the above example, you didn't like it, but you are saying good question. So that is the irony. Then situational, something happens we don't expect to happen. Example, fire station is burned down. Now, who thinks that, what is the role of a fire station? To be ready to douse the fire wherever there is emergency. But we never assume or think that, fire station itself will catch fire. Right? So that is why this is a situational irony. The fire station is burned down. Then you have dramatic irony. The audience knows something, characters do not. Now we know, if you have read Shakespeare's play, Hamlet, very famous play, Hamlet, it's a tragedy. So we know, right, as readers and as audience that there is some issue with Hamlet, right? He is displaying signs of being mad, but this is something other characters in the play do not know. So that is why it is called a dramatic irony, used primarily in dramas. Okay, so to know more about irony as a about irony and different forms and other things, you can refer to Irony as a Principle of Structure by Kenneth Brooks. It's a work by the American scholar Kenneth Brooks. Yeah, so with this particular context, now let's start and look at different functions of literature. What exactly literature does? Okay, and that is what we are going to explore in today's lecture. I hope so far everything is clear and there are no technical issues as well.
No, sir.
Thank you so much for the quick response. Yeah, so before we jump into the topic, before the points that I have to make, I'll make. I just want to ask you, what do you think literature should do in a society? When we purchase a bike, right? We purchase a bike because it should help me go to office, right? It should help me fulfill my daily chores, like buying groceries from a shop which is away from my house, right? It should help me in medical emergency to take somebody to the hospital, or if I am in a condition, I should be able to use a bike and go to hospitals. Different functions are there of the bike also. Similarly, each and everything we have in society has some function. Now, in a similar vein, let's think about what literature does to the society, or how uh, it is beneficial or harmful to the society. In what way literature is useful for human beings. Any idea?
Yeah, it gives us more information, new knowledge, or it tells us about our history and cultural things.
Yes. So, as you have rightly understood, so one function of literature is to inform us, right?
Yes,
One
sir. It's
function of, yeah,
Sir.
very wonderful, wonderful,
Yes, sir.
very good. So one important function of literature is to inform us, because we cannot go back and live the life of our ancestors, because they have lived and they have gone, right? And what is whatever remains about whatever information remains about them is preserved in some form of literature or the other. Okay. It could be in the form of a personal narrative, it could be in the form of letters, right? Or written by our ancestors, right? By ancestors, I mean, humanity in general, people of any, region, any place, our relative or non-relative. But as a human being, if they have lived prior to us, right, their information, right, their own experiences, whatever knowledge they shared, all those things are preserved in one form of literature or other. Like some information is preserved as letters, some as diaries, some as novels, some as normal books, right? So there are different forms in which that information is preserved. So literature can help us get information about our ancestors, their knowledge and other things. So one important function, as you have rightly identified, is to inform us, right? Or teach us also, right? Inform us is more passive, but more active work in that places teaches. So literature uh, has a role as a function to teach us about our past. Okay. Any other guesses apart from this point? Any other point that you would like to make a guess about?
Instructive literature may be there, sir. User manuals, guides like that.
Yeah.
They are
So
instructing us to do something.
yes, wonderful. Yes, yes. This is what it reminds me of one theory that we have studied, speech act theory, right? So language is not only used to communicate but also to do things. So similarly, literature, the one function of literature is to inform us, but the other function is also instruct or teach us, right? How to do
And
something, right? Teaching is skill kind of thing, right?
argumentative
That's what you
also
mean,
can.
right?
By learning
Okay.
the language of literature, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. So the one another function is to instruct us, to teach us. Let's take some of the views of prominent philosophers who thought about this, who thought through this the idea of what literature is out to do in a society, what role literature must play or has to play in the society, right? So first important to know point, as we have as somebody in the classroom has rightly pointed out, is to inform us or teach us. So, but Plato, Greek philosopher Plato, he says in his work Republic that it is not teaching anything and everything. The function of literature is to teach morality. Okay, teach morality. So literature can teach anything, right? Morality and immorality also, discipline and indiscipline also, right? Making the world better and destructing the world also. But Plato says, no, literature must not teach everything. The function here is to teach morality. Whatever good things are there, whatever better or human useful things to human beings are there, from concise point of view, from a spiritual point of view, from religious point of view, whatever good things are there, that must be taught. So literature, if it is produced by you or me or anybody else, should achieve the purpose of teaching goodness, of teaching, morality. Have you heard of, controversies that, so and so movie is not being allowed, so and so, novel or book is not being, allowed to be launched or printed. Have you heard these kind of things in the past? A particular movie is
Yes.
not, not being allowed to screen in certain state or in the country. Yes, the reason is, in any country or in any society, you have, certain codes of ethics, right? Certain moral codes. Hmm? So what happens is, anything, whether it is, film or whether it is book, right? Printed book, or any other thing, apart from just movies and, books, if those things go against the ethics of the society or the morality of the society, right? So you would see that, one particular department, one particular, section responsible for overseeing the uh, overseeing, the implementation or the violation of, these moral and ethical codes. What they would do is, they allow or disallow any new literature or any new film produced. Why? Because they don't want the society to get disturbed. Right. So in a country like, India, in a society like, Indian society, where majority of, Hindu religious practices are followed, Hindu scriptures are, respected, right? So this society, I'm just for the sake of argument telling you, this society, doesn't approve of, homosexuality, right? So what happens now? If tomorrow, if you want to produce one novel, or, one any film, and that film, conveys a overall message that, homosexuality is good, it should be promoted, it should be allowed in the society, then what would happen? Immediately, your censor board or your, publisher would say, no, we are not going to publish your work. We are not going to release your movie. Why? The country doesn't approve homosexuality. The country doesn't want the society to get corrupted because of, homosexuality. The religious scriptures doesn't allow, doesn't allow and doesn't approve homosexuality as a sexual orientation. So that's why your work cannot be published. This is a view as old as, Plato. So Plato said the function of a literature is to teach morality. If you have one means to communicate with masses, one means to instruct masses, to teach masses, then you should do it for a good purpose. You use, literature. Have you heard of, Jataka and Panchatantra tales? Have you heard about Panchatantra tales and Jataka tales?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if
Mr.
you come across, if
Yes,
you come
sir.
across, if you come across such stories, you'll see that, there are good moral, message in each of these stories, right?
Yes, sir.
And those stories are used, told, retold again and again to generation after generation for thousands of years. Why do you think that is, being used in the society? Because those are the stories, though small, but they are powerful when it comes to teaching morality to every young generation, new generation. Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Yes, sir.
this is what Plato means. This is what Plato is trying to tell us, that if you are producing a story, if you are producing any piece of literature, it should teach morality to the listener, to the learners, to the masses, to the people in the society, rather than teaching immorality, teaching bad things. If you have to teach bad things, you don't produce literature itself. Thank you. We don't need literature. But if you want to produce literature, do it for good. Okay. So then his disciple, right? Acha, we'll take up a few points from this slide and then move to the next one. Well, you understood, right? The function of literature is to teach morality, according to Plato. Plato says, a philosopher is superior to a poet. A poet is an imitator. But this whole idea of Plato, there is one particular question that is that's just struck me, is that oftentimes you find in question paper that why Plato uh, wanted to banish poets from the society. This is a question related to Plato. Oftentimes is asked in multiple exams, including your master's exams also. Why Plato recommended banning poets? Right? As I told you, poetics means literature, and poet here means writer. Okay, you think it that way. So why he wanted to ban a poet? Because he think any writer, right, is far removed from reality, whereas a philosopher is superior to a poet, because a philosopher thinks about uh, uh, things around him. He thinks about the universe, about the world, about the people, right? Whereas a poet, what he does, only imitate. He says something, he writes about it. He thinks about something, he writes about it. So he is basically imitating. So that is one of the reasons. Second reason is, as per Plato, uh, a poet or a writer is thrice removed from the reality, or far removed from the reality, the truth. What, according to Plato, is actual truth? The God himself is the actual truth. The realm of God, the higher heavens, right? That realm, that kingdom is actually the truth for Plato. He says that God, right, created Earth, our universe, right? So as a second reality. And now you are there. You and I are there as writers, as poets, and we are observing the reality around us, the mountains, the trees, the houses, the people, and everything. And then we are producing a copy of it. So that is why it is thrice removed from the reality. So by producing literature, you are taking people away from the reality, the truth. Which means Plato believes that, if you observe the universe for yourself, if you see what is going around you, you look at the mountains, you look at the weather, you look at the trees, you look at the different innumerable species created by God, including human beings, you would be able to understand the truth, the God, and the universe created by the God, the purpose of your life, the purpose of this universe. You need not have to be a writer. Now, what writer does? He sees something, he reads about it, and then gives that to somebody to read. Oh, one more time we are lost. What we are understanding is not what God has created. We are understanding what a person is, has understood about the earth, about the universe, about the people. So that is why Plato is not very in favor of poets. And another charge of Plato against writers and poetry or poetics is that it feeds and waters passion. Now religion says keep your passions in control, keep your emotions in control. Don't become too excited and don't become too sad. Don't become too angry. Right? So religion says, morality and spirituality says, have a fine balance of all these things. And Plato believes that literature feeds and waters passion, and that is why all these things are not good for the society. Whether you are giving printed or oral material which is not exactly what God has created in terms of truth, then it is taking people away from the truth, because it is fueling passions, feeding passions. That is why it is not good. And a society with the people whose passions are not controlled, whose emotions are not controlled, would do damage to the society. So that is why he recommended poets or otherwise writers to be banned from the society. Okay, now we'll move on to his disciple, Aristotle. In his work Poetics, he also is of the view that literature must be uh, uh, used to teach morality. He's a disciple of Plato and responds to the charge. In his definition of tragedy, he talks about catharsis, that is purgation or cleansing of emotions. Now, at the time when Plato and Aristotle, right, were talking about literature, the dominant form or the popularly available form of literature was drama. Okay, that too in a performative form. Now that is why we have a reference to here specifically to tragedy, which is one form of form of a drama. So in defining tragedy, what tragedy is, right? Though this definition is independent of any particular genre, right? When we understand what tragedy is, we know that it applies to contemporary nowadays, to drama as well as to a tragic story, right? To fiction also. But primarily, tragedy is seen as a subgenre of a form of drama. Okay. So in his definition of tragedy, Aristotle talks about catharsis, that is purgation or cleansing of emotions. Now we know what charge Plato has made against poets and poetry, that it fuels, it feeds, or it waters passion. Now Aristotle is not saying that passion is not involved in the production and in usage of the literature. He doesn't deny. But what he says is, instead of fueling passion, he says actually literature is helping cleanse the passion. You got my point. For example, now what Plato is saying is that if somebody reads about a case of injustice in the form of a poetry against, say, one weak person by a oppressor. Now, after reading that, what Plato says, the person who is reading has become, tensed. He becomes angry, right? But on the other hand, Aristotle says the person who reads literature, so literature actually, cleanses that high passion into normal. Like, for example, if you go and watch a movie where the actor, the lead actor as a hero, if he punishes the system for not doing its duty, do we feel happy or not? We do feel happy. बहुत अच्छा हुआ. वो करप्ट पुलिस वाला है ना, उसको हीरो ने बहुत अच्छा किया. This is what we feel. Do we feel or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So what Aristotle says, instead of fueling the passion, watering the passion, rather through literature you neutralizes the passion. This is what Aristotle says. And after watching that movie, now next time you don't feel like, in our real life, you don't feel like cursing the policeman, that corrupt policeman, because our emotions have become already balanced, normal. So this is what Aristotle tries to say. Tragedy. So we'll move on. So tragedy acts like a medicine to cure soul of diseases. This is the important point that Aristotle says. So it is your literature that balances your emotions and acts like a medicine. You are not able to fight the system. System can crush you like anything. But when you see a hero beating the system, right, taking revenge on your behalf, you feel very happy and relaxed. बहुत अच्छा हुआ. आपको नींद भी बहुत अच्छा आएगा after watching that movie. So here, film as a form of literature, a modern form of literature, is actually, we are able to understand that it's making us relax, and that is what is like curing the soul of diseases. And there is one famous writer, John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost. He says, he compares principle of catharsis to principle of homeopathy. Like cures like. Okay, now we have one more person, one more philosopher. These two were classical Greek philosopher. And now this is a English a philosopher, Sir Philip Sidney. He is a Renaissance period writer from England or English, who defended attack on literature by Puritans, particularly Stephen Gosson, in the school of abuse. They called poetry a dominant form of literature then. Earlier, we know that drama was the dominant form. So by Middle Ages, right, in England, poetry was dominant. Now, referring to poetry, Stephen Gosson. Okay, I think you can read that name on screen. Stephen Gosson, in his work, The School of Abuse, levels 4 different charges against the poetry. That is the dominant form of literature. What? That is, literature is waste of time. Here, poetry, right, means literature. So literature is waste of time, mother of lies, nurse of abuse, and Stephen Gosson supports Plato, that he rightly banished poets. Now let us see these 4 different charges. First, waste of time. Now he says that reading literature is actually a waste of time. Literature won't bring or won't change anything for good or for bad. So that's why it's a waste of time. By producing poetry, neither the writer nor the reader is going to achieve anything worthwhile, and that's why it is a waste of time. This is a charge leveled by Stephen Gosson against the poetry. Second, it's mother of lies. Why he is calling it mother of lies? Because, in order to make things interesting in terms of, hearing, in terms of, reading it, to please you, our imagination, to please the ears of the reader, we invent, a lot of things as writers. We mix up things. We don't strictly, hook up to facts. And when you are not stating facts, when you are not telling truth, then whatever else you say or whatever else you write becomes what? Lies, isn't it? So that is why he says poetry is actually mother of lies. Next, nurse of abuse. Now, using poetry, you discredit somebody, you tarnish image of somebody, you do personality harm to somebody, right? You level different, charges against, somebody or some people or some group. So that is why it's nurse of abuse. So using poetry, we abuse someone or somebody or something. That is why it's nurse of abuse. And the last point is, whatever Plato, suggested regarding poets, that, it is right. Poets should not be allowed to produce literature in a society, because eventually what they do is, they mislead people and thereby misleading the society. And that is what makes the society to fall apart, break, get spoiled. So these are the 4 different, charges of Stephen Gosson against poetry in his work, The School of Abuse. Now, in response to this, Sir Philip Sidney comes up with, 4 different, responses. Now, he says, first thing, the first charge was, it is a waste of time, right? So to that, Philip Sidney says, it is actually not waste of time, it is source of knowledge. Now, the first point that, somebody suggested when we were talking about function of literature is to inform, right? So literature is helping us to know about people, about history, about culture, about civilization, about past, about future, about present. So what does literature do in this case? It's acting as a source of knowledge. And then to the charge that is, it is mother of lies, Sir Philip Sidney says, no, it is not. In fact, poet is the least liar among all writers. Now you take all different types of writers. Among that, you would find that, poet is the least. Okay. And then the third charge, that is, nurse of abuse, to that Sidney says, poetry doesn't abuse man's spirit. Poetry does not abuse man's intellect. Rather, intellect abuses poetry, which means the problem of this abuse is not inherent to poetry. It is inherent to the man and man's intellect. Man can use any good thing for a bad purpose, right? So that good thing doesn't become bad. It is the person who is making bad use of that. Similarly, poetry doesn't abuse man's wit. It is wit abuses poetry. And the last one is poet Plato rightly banished poets. Plato warned men not against poetry, but it's abused by poets. Now you see, Plato has advocated for use of literature to teach morality, isn't it? He actually advocated that literature should be used to teach morality. He did not outrightly rejected literature, its production. He tried to show that literature, if not produced with right intention in a purposeful way, can mislead the society. That is, if you do not rightly produce the truth, and if you do not promote or fuel emotions, right, then you are good. So he only showed the dangers. That is, literature as a tool has the potential to be misused. And if it is misused, then it harms the society. Therefore, the poets or the writers must be checked, kept under close scrutiny and guard. That's what he meant. Similarly, Sir Philip Sidney, in Apology for Poetry, says that Plato warned men not against poetry, but it's abused by poets. So literature in itself is not problematic, but the people who are producing literature can become problematic. Okay, so that is why the poets must be disciplined in order to produce right literature. The last point is, he considers poet as the creator of a moral world. Okay, when the purpose of teaching morality is the function of literature, then poet as a person who's creating literature is actually helping in create a moral world. Okay, a moral world order. So that is a very higher goal or purpose of a poet, of a writer. So we'll quickly recap a few important key points from this block. That is, literature has a social function. By producing literature, if we are teaching morality, teaching good things to the society, then it means literature has a social function. A writer is influenced by society and sometimes influences it. Do you agree with this statement? Society influences the writer and writer is influenced by the society. It's a two-way process. A person born and brought up in a society is influenced by the society. But when he grows up, through his actions, through his thoughts, he also influences the society. So it's a two-way process. Art mirrors life and may even shape it. Literature presents a picture of society. In other words, we say literature is a mirror of the society. So whatever is produced as a poetry, drama, novel, or like that, those are actually what is observed by the writer. So he sees the society, He understands something about it and he writes it. So that is a reflection of what the writer has seen. That is nothing but society. Okay. And the last point in this slide is literature exists independently with an aim on its own. So there is one particular movement which says that art for art's sake need not have to be anything but literature itself. Okay. Now we'll go and move to the another topic, analysis of literary language. If you have any questions until this point, please raise it before we move to another one. Any questions, or shall we move?
You shall move, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, so now we understood the function of the literature. So you remember this, if you happen to become a poet, a dramatist, a screenwriter, or a novelist, a short story writer, or a filmmaker, remember wise people who understood the world before us, are suggesting us to use literature to make the society better, right? Well, so now we'll see a few examples of how language is involved in literature, or we'll try to see the linguistic or language what do we say symbols, right? A language, use of language in the literature. We understood one point that it is figures of speech that makes a normal language a literary language, right? So we'll see some examples how a literary language looks like. Okay, what are the elements in the language of literature that we need to pay attention to? Okay, yes. So what is poetry? It's a oldest or ancient mode of communication. So until the invention of printing press, a majority of the world communicated through poetry. Okay? I'm not talking about everyday normal language. At a higher level, whatever was communicated was in the form of poetry. And then use of finer words than in prose and refined language. Now, the distinction of poetry is that you will find a lot of refined words. Okay. Generally, when we speak, we go with commonly used words, and we don't pay attention to sophistication. But if you read a piece of poetry, you will find that the language is sophisticated, right? And resembles a different level, gives the impression of a different level of usage of the language. And that is why it is not possible for everybody who knows the language to understand the poetry, what is being said in the poetry. It requires a proper training. Okay. Now it has its own forms also. Like within poetry, you have epic, sonnet, ode, etc. And then it uses a rhythm, that is stress and unstressed syllable. And in addition, now we'll take one example of rhythm. Wonderful in university. So two different words right? But one has a prominence or a stress on the first part of the three-part word. And in the second example, you have, the middle part getting the stress out of the three-part word. Okay. So wonderful. So in wonderful, so one is getting prominence. That is what stress is. And the other two is being said with less prominence. That is why it is unstressed. So in case of, university, so the middle part is getting prominence. The other two are not, spoken with prominence. That is why they are unstressed. So this is a feature of, English language, and this is something, you may not find in maybe Telugu and Urdu. We give prominence to each and every syllable in Urdu. I think also same is the case in Telugu. Can you speak can you give an example of any one sentence in Telugu, or any word in Telugu? Hmm? Like for example, avakai. Hmm? Are you with me? Am I connected with you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Push,
So when
pushpamu,
we
flower, flower is a pushpamu.
pushpamu. So
Push,
whether
equally
it's
distant.
avakai or pushpamu, the prominence given to different parts within the word is same. You don't feel like some is being some part of the word is
That's it.
being said with loud sound, and the other with less intensity instead of sound. Yes, so that is not the case in Telugu, and so is the case in Urdu also. We give
Cool,
equal
cool.
prominence, or almost equal prominence to all the syllable in the word.
Yes, sir.
But English is distinct. English is different. That's why when we speak English, it doesn't sound as if we are speaking like native speaker. We are not accustomed to this, niche upar, kam zyada, right? Wonderful. We say wonderful, right? University. We say with equal prominence. But if the same is pronounced by a native speaker, he will say wonderful. University.
Yes.
So you barely hear the last two part, the other two part in this three syllable word. And that is how it is spoken. And that is why it becomes difficult to comprehend them, to understand what they are saying. That is one of the reason, the technical reason. So at a word itself, at a sound level itself, there is a different pattern or different mechanism or different system which we are not familiar with. In Indian languages, this problem is not there. This feature is not there, I would say rather. Yes. Now we also have rhyme, right? In poetry, you have this characteristic, that is there is a rhyming. So we are familiar with this very popular rhyme: twinkle twinkle little star, how I wonder what you are. So rhyme is at a last word or last two words level. Hmm? And also at the uh, letter level also. Letter in the sense sound level. Cha cha, twinkle twinkle. So cha cha, little, again cha, star, again cha. So twinkle twinkle little star, how I wonder what you are. Okay, so star R in this like rhyming. Also cha cha. Okay. And you have poetry. In poetry, you also have foot and meter. Foot is a unit of stressed and unstressed syllable in a line of poetry. Just okay. Now, foot is a technical term used in poetry. So it is not the foot, right, of our leg. Rather, it is a technical term for a unit of stress and unstressed syllable in poetry. Now we have, I am, trochee, anapest, dactyl, spondy, pyric, amphibranch. So these are different types of foot in poetry. Okay. Now, when we say that one of the most used foot in English is I am. You please remember this from examination point of view, also from any competitive exam point of view. The most used foot in English poetry is I am, the first one. And what it is unstressed syllable followed by stressed one. Unstressed syllable followed by stressed one. There are only two syllables, unstressed and stressed. And first one is unstressed, second one is stressed one. That is what is I am, right? I am. And we have one example here, alone, 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 alone. Okay. So is not getting prominence, but lone is getting prominence. So this is an example of unstressed syllable followed by stressed syllable at a word level. In a word, you have two syllables. First one is unstressed, the second one is stressed. So alone, 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 right? Now in English poetry, this combination of unstressed and stress, this is one pair, right? There would be 5 such pairs in English poetry, in English line, in typical line. I'm not talking about all entire poetry, but typically or most of the time, English poets have used iambic pentameter. We'll come to the meter in the second line. So then you will have a more clarity. So meter is the basic rhythmic structure of a verse or lines in poetry actually. So monometer, which means we have only I am or any of these remaining one, occurring only single time. But if this say I am unstressed syllabus followed by syllable is repeats twice, then it becomes diameter. If it repeats thrice, then it becomes trimeter. Which means, say we have alone as one word which has unstressed syllable followed by stressed one. So if this alone, if it repeats thrice, then it is a trimeter. Now try to change second and third alone with some other word which has same unstressed and syllable, unstressed and stressed syllable combination. So in English poetry, you will see in a typical English poetry, most of the time, what you have is iambic pentameter, which means this combination of unstressed syllable followed by stress occurring 5 different times. Let the word be anything, but the structure is unstressed syllable followed by stressed syllable repeating 5 times. So iambic pentameter, 5 feet per line, is the most used meter. Okay, remember this, foot and meter in English. Okay, some literary devices. You have alliteration. Alliteration and onomatopoeia is also many a times asked in examination in your MA as well as in different competitive exams. Alliteration is the recurrence or repetition of identical consonant sounds in a line or succession of words. For example, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. Okay, so here ta ta sound and ba ba sound is repeating. Both ta and ba are consonant sounds. So a repetition of sounds like these, of consonant sounds like these, is called alliteration. Okay. And what is onomatopoeia? It is the forming of a word by imitating the sounds the word is referring to. I heard a fly buzz when I died. Okay. So buzz is a fly, right? How does a dog, what kind of sound a dog produces?
Bow, bow.
Yeah. So instead of saying barking, barks, if you are saying a dog bow wow, then bow wow is actually the literal sound produced by that animal. So using exact sound produced by an animal, insect, or any other thing in the poetic language, right, is called onomatopoeia. Remember this. So if a fly comes near you, what kind of sound you hear? Right? So that is what is buzz actually in English. And a dog, bow wow. And a cat, meow. So all these are using the exact sound produced by that animal or insect in the poetic language. And this character is called onomatopoeia. You have imagery and symbolism. I think we are running out of time. Okay, so we have only a couple of minutes left. Okay, so some more device, that is imagery, symbolism. Imagery refers to use of language by writers to create images in the mind of the reader. Now let's see this example by William Carlos William. I have eaten the plums that were in the ice box and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Now, when you read this, an image is created in your mind of plums being in the ice box and thinking of eating that in the breakfast. So an image is created in your mind. So using language to describe thing in such a way that an image is formed in your mind. So this technique is called imagery. Okay. And you have symbolism. It is the use of symbols to represent ideas or qualities. The color white stands for purity. So here white is a symbol of what? Of purity. Similarly, dove is a symbol of purity, right? Well, we have some more things. I think a couple of things are there. We'll try to finish it. Okay, fiction. Now, in fiction, you have all those characteristics that we talked about in poetry, whether it's metaphor, simile, imagery, right, onomatopoeia, alliteration, whatever. All those can be used in drama, can be used in fiction, short story, novel, in any form of literature. Okay. Now, some distinct feature in additional feature in fiction you have is repetition. Repetition refers to repeating of words or expressions by writers to create an effect or for emphasis. Example, I came, I saw, I concurred. So in this first example, you see I repeated, right? And this repetition creates a special effect in the literature, also in the mind of the reader. We have second example, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So in this, instead of just single letter or one word, there is a repetition of two letters, it as well as was. Okay, so similar repetition as a technique is used by writers to emphasize on certain thing or to create a special effect. And then you have dialogue, making each character use a different or speak in a unique style that best suits it. Example, Mrs. Malaprop in Shadian's play, The Rivals, uses a distinct language. To give you example from one film, you see that typically in Telugu films. Again, I'm just giving an typical example. Okay, that may not be the case in every movie, but yeah, when we see that in Telugu movies you have a protagonist talking about talking in standard Telugu, Telugu of coastal Andhra, right? And you have just comedians talking in a different language, which is mostly most of the time it is Telangana Telugu or Rayalaseema Telugu. Okay, so that distinction in dialogue in a speech is a feature of fiction. Now in prose you have letters, like a letter written by Wentworth to Anne in Persuasion novel by Jane Eyre. Okay, and speeches within a novel or a short story, you will have some letters in that addressed to some character, and you also have speeches, like Antony's speech in Julius Caesar, that starts with Brutus is an honorable man. So these are some of the examples of usage of distinct language in literature, because these are the distinct features that makes a normal language a literary language. So with this, we shall conclude today's class, and tomorrow's class would be the last class, I hope, I think, as per schedule. And I'll try to discuss all the possible important questions. So I request you to don't miss that class and convey the same to your other fellow classmates, that tomorrow's class would be the important class from examination point of view. So far, we tried to recap different blocks and different important topics from the blocks. So thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you, sir.